It's time for Matt Williamson's wide receiver rankings part 1, because this is a long list of fantasy football wide receivers for 2024. Who's at the top? Who are the elites? Who are the wide receiver ones in 2024 that you'll be banking on in your drafts on today's Peacock and Williamson?
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We love our everydayers. We love it when you hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you are listening to this podcast. Today's episode of P&W brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down and the sports stop sporting quite like we want them to. This summer, FanDuel is hooking all customers up with boosts or bonuses every single day. That's right. There's something new for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, here we go. This is a big one, and this is so big, we're going to split it into a couple of episodes here with fantasy football wide receiver rankings, and we're going to focus on the top and the wide receiver ones, maybe some emerging players that are in that group that we expect to be in that group. And we're going to go into the sleeper side of things, go a little bit deeper. You got nearly 100 names on your list here, and you actually just stopped ranking them once you get to like the 70s. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about those guys and some of our favorites on tomorrow's show. But for actually on Thursday's show, because Wednesday is our mailbag, by the way, get those questions in at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL or drop them in the YouTube comments. So let's start at the top. Let's focus on the top at wide receivers with today's show. And who is your wide receiver one, Matt? And why is it not the guy who just got paid the most ever at wide receiver, Justin Jefferson?
Yeah, it's no knock on Jefferson. I mean, he's done nothing wrong, of course. He's a tremendous football player. I think his situation is a little worse than the others. I think there's 4 wideouts that are an elite tier and make up a top 7 overall that I think is where you want to pick this year. And I have him 4th of the bunch, but the other 3 I think have better situations, comparable football players.
Let's pause there for a second and talk about that. So if you are in a league where you get to say you win the league, so you get to pick where you select in the following year's draft or something like that, or you have some way of deciding where you're going to pick in a fantasy draft. Where do you want to pick, Matt? You're telling me there's 7 elite players when you combined all the position groups, 3 running backs, 4 wide receivers. So the top 7 is where you want to be. Does that mean you want to kind of be drafting number 7 if you're picking your spot in a fantasy football league this year?
For me, yes. I mean, I have an affinity for picking in the middle of rounds when all things are said and done, especially late in when the draft starts moving along, because you're in round 6 or 8 or 10 and you're torn between 2 guys and you're picking 6 or 7. There's a chance that guy might make it around, but if you're picking at the end, you don't. So I prefer to pick in the middle of rounds. With all respect to Christian McCaffrey, I think he's the first overall pick, but I don't know that it's a landslide over my 7th guy. And we talked about this, I guess it was last week now, but there's 3 running backs, McCaffrey, Bijan, and Hall. They're all in my elite tier and in the top 7, and 4 receivers. So Jefferson's my 4. I'll tell you the other 3 here in a minute. But if I end up with Justin Jefferson at 1.07 or Breece Hall at 1.07, I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled.
Right. And that's a great way to put it. And I don't think Justin Jefferson will get to 1.07 in most leagues. No. I think he'll go over these wide receivers and maybe be wide receiver 1 in a lot of leagues. He still might go 1.1 in some leagues. So who do you have over Justin Jefferson in your elite tier of wide receivers if Justin Jefferson is number 4?
I have Jamar Chase 3, and I know he's been great, but I'm expecting the blow-up 2,000-yard season from him, and here's why. First off, he's about due for a contract, and you can say what you want. Everybody tries their hardest, but contract years inspire a little extra something. And also with Higgins and Burton and their other receivers, basically Tyler Boyd being gone, I think Chase is going to take more slots or more slot snaps than he ever did. And anyone that really follows fantasy or, production from wide receivers know it's easier to produce points out of the slots. So if his motivation, hopefully a healthy quarterback for the whole season, plus added slot snaps, could be Chase is a league winner. This is his breakout year where he's number one. So I have him 3. I have Tyreek 1, CeeDee Lamb 2. I know a lot of people have Lamb over Hill just because there's no one competing for targets. Like, I do think Lamb will probably lead the league in target. But what Tyreek did last year was mind-boggling. I mean, yards per route run, fantasy points per route run, awesome offense. I don't think he's getting old at all. I mean, Tyreek Hill, to me, rivals McCaffrey for the first overall pick.
Tyreek Hill is still unbelievable and such a unique talent in the NFL, and it's fun to watch him play. But the reason CeeDee Lamb is up there for a lot of people is just pure volume. There's pure nobody volume that's easier to say this guy is going to get all of the targets at wide receiver on his football team. A contract year for his quarterback, CeeDee Lamb, still doesn't have a deal done for himself. Could he potentially even be in a contract year if he has to play on his 5th-year option, if that keeps going in the direction it's going? So, it's the efficiency of Tyreek Hill, the efficiency of Justin Jefferson, but CeeDee Lamb is probably going to lead the league in receptions, in targets, in opportunities, as long as he stays healthy. And so, you might need to adjust if it's a full PPR league, if it's a half PPR league, and if it's no PPR, then you probably do like Hill. You do like Jamar Chase a little bit more than someone like CeeDee Lamb potentially, but he's just going to collect so much volume, CeeDee Lamb. So your rankings again: Tyreek Hill number 1, CeeDee Lamb 2, Jamar Chase, the expected super breakout for Jamar Chase here in 2024 for Matt Williamson at number 3, Justin Jefferson at number 4. That is the elite tier of wide receivers, which is also in the elite tier of fantasy football draftees in 2024. Top 7. You want to draft 7 in your fantasy football league.
I think so. Like 2 would be great. And maybe you end up with Tyreek or Lamb or maybe even McCaffrey. That's fine. But if I could get 7 and Chase or Jefferson or Hall or Bijan falls to me and I just don't even have to think about it, and then I get to pick sooner again in the second round, that's where I want to be.
Okay, just and real quick, because we got time, because this is going to be a two-parter with wide receivers.
There's so much to talk about here.
Let's say you get Bijan or Breece Hall at number 7. You get a running back.
Whoever falls. Right.
Who's your favorite wide receiver then after that, when it turns back to you in round 2, in the middle of round 2, who are you trying to draft in a 12-team draft?
Well, let's wait a little, because that's basically like my 9 through 12 neighborhood. And I will say I like the second round wide receivers a lot better than the second round running backs. That might be like Pacheco or ATN or Kyron Williams. Like, the running back show, I was not nearly as excited to draft guys as I was this show for sure. Just because which isn't uncommon. There's a ton of receivers, obviously, but I don't mind a lot of different wide receiver options in the middle of the second round.
And it's pretty likely that, by the time you go through the late round 1 and the turn in early round 2, Jonathan Taylor and Saquon Barkley and those running backs are going to be gone for you probably too.
Yeah.
Because other people are going to see that. Zero running back. If you can get that hero running back, that's the way to play it, I think, if you can in 2024. That's what we're looking at right now in the early goings here as we go through Matt Williamson's positional rankings for 2024 fantasy football. And
so real quick, what I need to figure out is if I actually do pick 6 or 7 or in that neighborhood, do I want Bijan or Hall more than I want Chase or Jefferson? That's tough, because the second round is much kinder at wide receiver, but boy, it'd be hard to turn your nose up at Jefferson at 6. You know what I mean?
Right. Even for a running back, and then maybe you just have to go 0 running back. And you're like, all right, well, we're going to go
all in.
We're just going to draft some rookie running backs, and we're going to see how this goes, and we're going to be a powerhouse at wide receiver.
Do you agree with my top 4 receivers? You honestly could put them in any order, and I wouldn't fight you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's hard for me. I always have my scouting hat on, and this is
Mhm.
where I fail in fantasy football sometimes.
Me too.
Is I don't want to chase stuff that's not greatness in your football players. You know what I
Yep.
mean? I'm chasing the talent and hope that the volume is there and their own team throws them the ball as much as I think they should get thrown the ball, and circumstances are good. And so I kind of tend to lean toward who I think is the better player in drafts. And sometimes that's not the right way to go when it comes to fantasy football.
One of my other weaknesses is I'm a year too early on guys pretty often because I love the prospects, watch them coming out of school,
Yeah.
all the draft homework, all the dynasty stuff I do. But even my buddies, my main league that we've done since high school, I mean, we'll laugh and be like, you might have taken him a year too early, like that's one of my trends.
Yeah. All right. Next, who is in the next tier of wide receivers? Matt Williamson's wide receiver rankings for 2024 fantasy football continues. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is sponsored by BetterHelp Online Therapy. Comparison is the thief of joy, and it's so easy to envy what other people have going on in their lives, especially when it comes to social media. Social media plays a huge role in that, and it's easy. And I know a lot of people have done that and get so caught up in wishing your life looked like someone else's and how their life is curated online. Well, it's not reality. And it might look like they have it all together on their Instagram, but in reality, they probably don't. And therapy can help you focus on what you want instead of what others have so you can start living your best life. And sometimes with therapy, it is so important just to check in, that weekly check-in. And I always talk about it when it comes to BetterHelp, that weekly check-in. Make sure you're hitting the points in your life every week that you want to achieve your goals. It is so important, and find that unbiased voice in your life. So if you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Stop comparing and start focusing with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today. Get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Tyreek Hill, CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson. Those are the elites. We've got a tier break. Who's up next for you, Matt? Maybe if you're at the end of round one in your fantasy football drafts.
Yeah, it's I'm on Ross St. Brown, and I don't think there's a massive gap between Jefferson and Brown, but there is a gap. And if I was sitting there at 8 overall and those top 7 that we harped on were off the board, I'd probably be pretty comfortable taking St. Brown. I mean, the volume's there, consistency's there, the system's there. They play a ton of games indoors this season, a ridiculous number. But I do think you're not quite getting the same as you would with Jefferson the pick before.
Yeah, and somewhat, it's kind of like CeeDee Lamb light, where you just know he's going to get a huge amount of targets, and he's lined up in the slot a lot. And it's almost an extension of the running game in some ways with some of these slot wide receivers that are power players. We've seen it with Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp in LA. They get the ball out quick and they target the heck out of that guy in the slot and work ways to get him off the line free, get him open with a quick route and march down the football field. And that's what Amon-Ra St. Brown does for the Detroit Lions.
Yeah, I'd be really shocked, unless he gets hurt or Goff gets hurt, of course, that you're unhappy taking him. I mean, he seems very safe. I don't know that he's a league winner. And so at 8, I'm fine with it. 5th receiver off the board, I'm fine with it. I just think those top 4 are a little special.
Wide receiver 6 for you, fantasy football 2024, is Garrett Wilson, Matt. And he's one of my favorites. And he's one of those that I've been talking about where, man, circumstances aren't great, quarterback in New York, but the talent is there. And I always keep drafting Garrett Wilson because of that. And I think that this is the year maybe with a healthy, he's so clearly their number one with a healthy Aaron Rodgers, and we didn't really get to see that rapport on the field, but they had the whole offseason to get that ready, and now a second offseason with Aaron Rodgers. Could Garrett Wilson be that blow-up player? That's probably what I'd be betting on because I just like the situation all coming together and the talent, and so that's why I tend to lean toward those players. So I really like Garrett Wilson for that reason this year.
I couldn't agree more. And I mentioned, St. Brown's pretty firmly my 5. But Wilson and A.J. Brown, I have flip-flopped 100 times between 6 and 7. And I think most people have Brown over Wilson. I totally understand that. I've been raving these last couple of weeks about how I think the Eagles are going to be a really, really good team. I'm bumping Eagles up my list, especially in the passing game. And there's nothing to dislike about Brown. But I'm with you on Wilson. I mean, he didn't hurt you last year even with like the worst quarterback play you've ever seen. I mean, it wasn't what it could have been, but he still was highly productive. And if there's anyone on this list that could be in that top 4 a year from now, I would bet on Wilson.
Yep. And AJ Brown, you know what you're going to get. He's number 7
Yeah.
for you. And I think that's why this is the right order with those two guys, is because we already know what we're going to get for AJ Brown. And just because of what else is going on in that offense, it's unlikely for him to go to a crazy level, but you feel really good about knowing how important he is in that offense as well.
100%. And I would easily use a first overall or a first round pick in a 12-team league on any of those 7 we mentioned. If I end up with AJ Brown with the 10th pick or whatever, fine. The 11th pick, I'm cool with that. Wilson's just so intriguing to me, so intriguing. I think he's a superstar in the making.
Number 8 is Davante Adams. I don't know what to do with Davante Adams.
I don't either.
He's still a great player. I thought it was hilarious earlier this offseason. There was an interview with Davante Adams, and he's like, well, you have to live with the choices you make in life sometimes. And basically, he's like, man, it sucks to be a Raider right now. That's kind of the vibe I got from him. But he should still have plenty of opportunity and could be a guy who's the top receiver in fantasy leagues this year.
He's awesome. And part of me even wonders, will he finish the year as a Raider? I mean, at the trade deadline, if they have 2 wins, is he going to end up somewhere else? There's plenty of teams that could use him. But his age is something to be concerned with, more so than these other guys. He's going to hit that age wall at some point. I think his quarterback play is very questionable. They now have 2 tight ends and another receiver that are going to get the ball. I mean, I don't know that his target share will go up. It probably goes down a little. And he doesn't have quite as much big play, long touchdown ability as some of these other top guys. But he's great.
And he might not have the quarterback to get him the ball down.
That's what worries
situations, depending on who wins the job there for the Raiders. So
you wouldn't have him over anyone we mentioned yet, would you?
No, but I like him right where he's at, and I still like Davante Adams over the next group of wide receivers.
He stood alone at 8 for me. And
this is where it gets tough for me. So you have Puka Nacua at number 9, and he went crazy as a rookie, obviously. But a full season, I don't put it this way. If you have to draft Puka Nacua first, I'm probably going to end up with Cooper Kupp on a lot of my teams.
Just for what you have to pay for the 2 of them.
Where they're gonna go. If you have to pay more for Puka, I can't say confidently that with both guys healthy all year, and that's been tough for Puka Nacua. And again, like I kind of laid it out there with Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Puka even got banged up as a rookie. When you play that role where you're in the slot all the time and you're catching those shorter passes and you get that crazy volume and target share, you get hit a lot, and you get hit by linebackers more often than you get hit by corners like some other receivers, and you get hurt a lot too. So that's the worry for me with that style of player. Is
they use him as a blocking fullback sometimes. He's kind of their Kyle Juszczyk, right?
Physicality is what makes him great, but also puts him in positions to get hit more and get hurt more. And that's why running back attrition is so high, because when you get hit, you get hurt. And so those players worry me a little bit. And I'm still not positive that Puka Nacua, with healthy, is going to be the more popular targeted player in that offense over Cooper Kupp still. So Cooper Kupp would be the guy I'd lean to, especially if his ADP is lower.
And it will be. And trust me, it's taken me a lot to buy in on Nacua as a player. I was a little I liked him coming out of school. I thought he went a little bit late. I by no means thought he should have been a 1st or 2nd round pick. Trust me, I wasn't the guy ahead of the curve on that. But it did take me a while to really think this guy's a big time player, no matter where he's at. He's not just a coach's creation. But I am a little worried that I'm a little too high on him. But boy, his numbers were great with and without Kupp. I can't imagine them going away from him. But these next 4 names or so are right there with Nacua. I think you can make a case to take any of them and maybe have higher upside and maybe are better football players, more talented, more pedigree.
So that's Puka Nacua at number 9. And so if we're talking about wide receiver ones here, which is in a 12-team league, the first 12 wide receivers. 10 is Drake London, 11 is Chris Olave, and 12 is Jalen Waddle. How did you split up that group of guys?
I went Waddle last just because it's not a huge thing, but a lot of the number 2 receivers, Godwin, Devontae Smith, Waddle, etc., on their team were good, not great last year for fantasy. They got a little bit overdrafted. It's not as easy to support 2 receivers as some people tend to think, and scoring's down in the league. So that hasn't been something you could bank on quite as much. But that being said, with Waddle, I mean, like if you look at his fantasy points per snap, it's unbelievably high. And he was injured much of the year. So I have no problem putting him 12. I could move him all the way up to 9. I'm a big Olave fan. I'm not quite to the Garrett Wilson love, but I love Olave. And I think his system hurt him a great deal last year. Like,
And what
everyone's go ahead.
What he does great is not what Derek Carr does great necessarily.
That's a worry. Yeah.
Kind of it's a weird match for huge fantasy production. Let's put it that way.
No doubt. And I'm not a Derek Carr apologist. I think he is what he is. But I also think last year's offense was very non-creative. You know, and I'm glad they found an offensive coordinator in New Orleans. I think that group could get a spike overall. And there's not much targets, not much competition for Olave. I mean, he should be one of the target leaders in the league, as should Drake London. I love London and Olave and Waddle on tape, probably more than Nakua. Everyone is projecting this London blow up, and I'm there. I mean, he's my 10th receiver, but is he going to take the huge leap to get to like CeeDee Lamb level? I don't know if that's in the cards.
I do like London here.
Yeah.
And, from that draft class, I just think Garrett Wilson was the better player. He was the better player coming out of college. He's a better NFL player, in my opinion, just because he's more dynamic. But Drake London now with the new offense, and talk about that, the Los Angeles Rams offense coming in. I would love to see, if we're getting reports in camp that Drake London's lining up all over the place, including the slot, and so that'd be a heavy target load.
Yeah.
And Kirk Cousins has produced tons of fantasy football wide receivers, right? So I love that for London. So I can see why a lot of people are really high on him, and it's probably why he's in your top 10.
No doubt. And Arthur Smith's now obviously the offense coordinator here in Pittsburgh. So I did a lot of Atlanta offensive studies over the last couple months. And yes, Smith is very frustrating if you own Bijan or Pitts or London, etc. But man, watching those Atlanta quarterbacks last year, it was worse than I thought in real time. Like, open receivers, Pitts and London in particular, just getting missed over and over and over. And that's not going to happen now.
All right, more. We're gonna go through about the top 20 or so wide receivers in Matt Williamson's 2024 wide receiver rankings. Talk a lot more about the next group of wide receivers and sleepers in part 2 of our fantasy football wide receiver rankings for 2024 on Thursday's episode. More in the top 20. Who are your wide receiver 2s, your strong wide receiver 2s in 2024 next? This episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Look, we love sports. That's why we're here, and we love them so much, we never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, NBA and NHL is over, even the NBA draft and the NHL draft is over, we get fewer games. And sports aren't quite sporting like we want them to. But FanDuel lets us keep going whenever we want. All you got to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime you're in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking all customers up with boosts and bonuses daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. We're talking about Major League Baseball bets and tons of ways to bet on the NFL 2024 season, like who's going to win the next Super Bowl. And the 49ers were #1. It looks like money's coming in on the Kansas City Chiefs now that are also 6-1 odds, tied with the 49ers for the highest odds. Then it's the Ravens, Lions, Bengals, and Eagles in that order for the highest odds to win the Super Bowl in 2024. So all you got to do is visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. So the wide receiver 2s, and it begins for you with the breakout player from last year that not a lot of people saw coming, which was Nico Collins of the Houston Texans, who got paid now, and he's CJ Stroud's #1 weapon. He is your number 13th ranked wide receiver.
Yeah, and this shouldn't surprise anyone, but this is a very rich area as well. Like, this is a great aisle to go shopping down, even if it's your first receiver off the board. these next 10 names or so are strong and should continue their winning ways, so to speak.
Which is why if you can, you get that top running back early, and there's a lot of fun aisles to go down the next couple of rounds at wide receiver.
Yeah, get two of these guys and McCaffrey or Bijan.
Right.
Like, it's not too bad. Now, Nico, I kind of saw coming. Like, I wouldn't say I thought he was going to be one of the top scorers in the league or the Stroud to be half as good as he was a rookie. But Nico was really good 2 years ago with terrible quarterback play. And few people seem to notice in a Texan team that was close to unwatchable. Now, I'm sure people are like, well, doesn't Diggs scare you? And Tank Dell's there. Yes, but I have them Nico, Dell, Diggs. And I think the money they gave Nico shows that he's the featured receiver.
Absolutely. And there's enough to go around.
Yeah.
For a one, and I assume there's probably going to be more passing volume because, again, CJ Stroud was a rookie last year, and now they can lean on him and go through a full offseason of like, oh, this is how we're going to get the ball to these guys. So, I love Nico Collins there, and very different situation from your next guy, Mike Evans, who's number 14 for you, and then you've got the rookie Marvin Harrison at 15. So you've got old faithful Mike Evans, and then the rookie that we expect to be great, but we don't know anything about what it's going to look like in that offense right after him.
Mike Evans is almost like Derrick Henry, where every year I think, well, he's bound to take a step back, and then he gets 1,000 yards, and he's awesome and scores tons of touchdowns. And I don't love that there was a coordinator change in Tampa. They used him a lot better this past year than in previous seasons, but I would imagine Todd Bowles recognizes that. Baker is back. He scores a ton of touchdowns. He's coming off an awesome year. So I think this is higher than a lot of people have Evans. I think people are starting to get scared of him, but give him to me all day long in this neighborhood. I don't know what to do with Harrison. Is this too early?
I like it. Like, let's say you got McCaffrey in round one and it came around again and you're at the turn, and then you get the faithful player in Mike Evans, and then you go rookie wide receiver. I don't know if they'd be there at that point, but at the turn, you kind of get both. You're like, all right, let's shoot for the moon with Marvin Harrison, but know that Mike Evans is going to be there getting us 1,000 yards. I like those guys kind of being back to back here. Marvin Harrison's the most difficult because talent wise, sure. But I don't know. And rookie wide receivers, it can take some time. But, man, he should have all the target share, too, because they don't have, he's their most obvious wide receiver one. The plan is for him to be the wide receiver one. You just don't know how the plan is going to be executed in Arizona.
And I mentioned this on the quarterback show. I had Kyler higher than most people do. I'm bullish on this offense. I think it's well constructed. I think it's good that there's a Michael Wilson, Trey McBride there. Not that they're going to really cut into his target share, but they at least deflect some of the attention. Where I have Malik Neighbors a couple spots down, and I think he's going to see rougher coverages than Harrison will, just because there's less around him and a worse quarterback. But hey, sometimes my mistake is I draft these guys a year too early. Sometimes our mistake is we just love the talent. So I'm going to keep making the mistake.
I'm with you. Make the mistake there. Number 16 for you right out. And the perfect example of why is because of the competition for touches potentially in the guys behind them. So the next guy for you is DJ Moore. Then after that is Brandon Ayuk at 16 and 17. And these are teams that, they're in a different era of their build as football teams. But there's a similar problem for both of those players is in any given week, who's going to be the featured player in that offense. And DJ Moore seems like he's the wide receiver one, but it's not going to be that easy. And Brandon Ayuk's the same thing. Brandon Ayuk, I just saw a stat with the 49ers offense that Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel and George Kittle all had exactly 5 weeks where they were the top receiver in that offense. And so the ball just gets spread around in that offense. And as efficient as Brandon Ayuk was, if the volume doesn't grow, the efficiency is probably going to come back to the mean a little bit. And that's why you're like, just give me the talented guy in Marvin Harrison instead. And there should be no reasons not to throw him the ball unless he's a bust.
Exactly. And I don't know a whole lot more to add than that. Moore and Ayuk had phenomenal seasons and are really, really good football players. I think they're better football players than they are fantasy assets, especially Ayuk. And one of the things with Moore that's, I think, a little bit different than like with the Texans is they added 2 receivers to compete with him that are big-time guys. A rookie and a Dunze and Keenan Allen. and it's a brand new quarterback, and we don't know his tendencies. So,
and Allen is like the
he's the
slot
whoopee,
target
right?
hog
Yeah.
guy. And so where's the volume going to be for more? But he's also kind of entering, or already is kind of in that Mike Evans territory of, but then he still gets 1,000 yards every year.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't think either will be bad. But as you kind of mentioned, I think there'll be weeks that Moore or Ayuk don't have great weeks for you. They'll have some blow-up weeks with 2 touchdowns, or there might be a week that Williams feeds Allen 12 targets, or it's a Debo week or a Kittle week, and it just gets a little frustrating.
To put it simply, you're shooting for the moon. You're swinging for the fences, ranking Marvin Harrison ahead of DJ Moore and Brandon Ayuk.
Yeah, and I don't think most people have him that, or have these two that low, but I think there'll be some down weeks.
That means you're taking Marvin Harrison in the second round of your drafts.
Yeah, late, but yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm in on that. It makes me not sleep well at night, but I can.
Well,
I'll get into it.
Coming right up after that. So finishing up the top 20 here, Michael Pittman, 18, Malik Neighbors, 19, and Devontae Smith, 20.
I don't think what Pittman did was at all an aberration, but he also has a semi-low ceiling, and I don't know that Richardson will be as good for him as Minshew. Kind of touched on Neighbors. I mean, he's probably every bit the prospect Marvin Harrison is. He's going to get a ton of targets, but he's not going to be easy sledding either. And Devontae Smith's a star. I mean, Devontae Smith's an unbelievable number 2. I'm really high on the Eagles offense. So if I can get any of those guys as my second receiver, I'm very, very happy.
I don't love the passing game in total in New York, so that's why I think I would have Marvin Harrison way ahead of Malik Neighbors.
Okay.
As far as rookie wide receivers go, as talented as Malik Neighbors is, Michael Pittman, you need the volume there, and you hope that their quarterback situation, that offense is really just on it from week 1. And but
he's kind of a bet on Steichen just to keep feeding them.
Yeah. So, but he needs to be fed. Not going to create as much on his own as almost anybody else that's been in the top 20 here. And Devontae Smith, it's just, how many opportunities he's going to have. If he was on a different roster, then he'd be much higher on this list, because I think he could be a 1, but he's kind of, in that Ayuk territory. It was like, okay, which weeks is he going to have the big weeks?
And they gave him nice money. So, I mean, he'll probably have a similar year as last year. He won't blow up and be a top 5 guy, but I doubt he hurts you.
So some big-time names we haven't heard from yet. We mentioned Cooper Kupp before. We've got the Terry McLaurins, the Amari Coopers, the Debos, the DKs, the Pickenses. We haven't heard about any Pittsburgh Steelers wide receivers yet. And Matt Williamson's top 20. How about the rest? 21 through, 75. I don't know how far we're going to go. Sleepers at wide receiver as well. And part 2 of our fantasy football wide receiver rankings, courtesy of Matt Williamson, coming up on Thursday. Get your questions in for tomorrow's Wednesday mailbag episode. Hit us on Twitter at BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL, or drop a question in the YouTube comments. Subscribe while you're there. Matt and I back tomorrow, right here, Peacock and Williamson.